Goldie Roger, Silver's Rayleigh, Man Who Lives with Whale, and the rest of them sailed to Laugh Tale to learn the full truth of the world. A truth allegedly so hilarious that it became the ultimate in-joke, and the Roger pirates vowed never to share it. Much to Applegrams's confusion, as he continues to reveal the history of Joy Boy, the world government, and the ancient weapons. However, these answers only raise more questions. Alright, I'd like to note that since late February, One Piece has been nothing but listening to Vegapunk's death message. We've been doing this for 3 months now, and honestly, I kinda don't want it to end. I feel like we have to be drawing close to the end of the message though, especially now that the elders know where the broadcast is coming from. But I think that Vegapunk still has at least one atomic bombshell left to drop on this story. Firstly though, with this current cover story, I'm beginning to think that I'm being trolled here, because we are currently 6 whole pages into Yamato's pilgrimage across Wano, and the actual pilgrimage still has yet to begin. This whole time, Yamato has just been visiting people and preparing for a journey, so I think it would be hilarious if we just went this entire cover story without Yamato actually going anywhere. Although we do have the plan. We know that Yamato's first stop is supposed to be Kibi, which is an area of Wano that we never got to explore during our 4 whole years on the island, so I'm pretty keen to see what's going on there. But I think this is just a side effect of the idea that the vast majority of actual important Wano characters live in the flower capital. So we've got to really take our time getting out of there in order to catch up with everyone. But we do get our first look at a post-raid Suru, who despite not being part of the raid managed to incur a lot more permanent damage than many who were. However, this injury is a direct result of Hold'em burning down Okobore town, and Suru was lucky to escape with that much damage. But right behind her is Oroshima, a man whose flower of relevance never quite bloomed. But if you remember, we met him very early on in Wano. He was the sumo wrestler who wanted to marry Kiku, and he was a bit of a dick in general, talking down to and subjugating people, in addition to that one time where it was implied that he ate the pet of an elderly couple. And with all of that in mind, I'm not sure why it looks like he, of all people, got a happy ending, because he never did anything to redeem his actions. But I don't know, I guess good on him for beating that narrative system, I guess. He just slipped by. Getting into the actual chapter, we pretty immediately jump into some big stuff here, as on page 1 we have a check-in with Imu, staring at what I imagine must be his favorite painting. The symbolism of this moment is very important, because whenever Imu appears in a panel, Oda tends to have us either meeting Imu's eye level or having him look down on us. Very commonly it's angling it so that Imu is quite literally looking down on you as well as the characters, which is very purposely done. Oda is using very simple visual language to portray Imu as being at the very top of this world, both literally and metaphorically. There's nothing he can look up to, he is the top. Which is why this first panel initially felt a bit weird to me, because what we're seeing here is Imu looking up at someone else. He's looking up at a very grand portrait of assumedly Nefertari Lily, who looks exactly like Vivi, and after 800 years, Imu still longs for her. Whether that be a tragic love story involving heartbreak and such, or a much more creepy and not as reciprocal love thing that was going on. Either way, the more we learn about this, the more I am not keen to be Vivi right now. Which reminds me, there was a post going around on Twitter saying that there are 2 types of Imu fan art. One is the classic, very well-endowed female Imu, whilst the other is, it's this, which I love, and it is looking like the second Imu fan art option is the one that's closest to canon at the moment, for better or worse, probably worse. It might be absolutely insane to say this, but right now I am feeling more humanity coming from Imu than I do from the 5 elders and most of the world nobles. Because whatever emotion this is, it is still an emotion, and I don't know if I see the 5 elders, as wicked demon things, spending centuries on end lamenting their lost loves. They probably wouldn't do that. And I guess it's weird to say because Imu visually looks the least human of all of them so far. But we use this to then cleverly transition into Alabasta, a very somber location where it's safe to say everyone's having a not so great day. And really, nobody's particularly keen to listen to Vegapunk's message. They've got other things going on. Firstly, we see Igaram and Karu making missing posters for Vivi, which I actually think is pretty funny, because I imagine that the plan is to send those to the World Economic Journal to be distributed like the bounty posters. But that would mean sending them through Big News Morgans, who has Vivi with him at the moment. So I think we might see a point in the future where Vivi picks up her own missing poster, kind of like when pirates get to see their own bounties. Which brings me to point number the 2nd. If Vivi is to rejoin the Straw Hats, then this missing poster serves as a great substitute for her lack of bounty poster, because it's something that avid collectors like Bartolomeo would need to have if Vivi officially joined the crew. But then, something much less fun, we visit the tomb of King Cobra, which brings in an air of finality to things. I feel very bittersweet about this moment because yes, it is sad, hence the bitter part, but also seeing Cobra honored with this grand resting place with his two closest advisors keeping guard on either side of him really shows how much the people of Alabasta loved Cobra. And I really like that our last image of him isn't the old man writhing in pain on the ground. It's this wonderful shot of him smiling, spreading that one tiny bit of joy, doing what he can from beyond the grave. Also, it is genuinely hard to feel bad for him because Oda did that arguably cop-out thing that he does with his old men characters and made it so that Cobra was clearly already dying of natural causes well before he was killed. So this does still feel like a natural conclusion. We've got Chaka there looking very stern about the whole situation, but Pell on the other hand, I reckon his face says more confused. Like he's staring at Cobra's burial chamber and thinking to himself, I don't understand. Why didn't he just not die? That's what I, Bird, did. Alright, though, speaking of death, lots and lots of death, something very important was clarified by Vegapunk in this chapter, because it is now officially confirmed that the weapon Imu possesses is the ancient weapon Uranus, and that's what was used to destroy Leloucia, with the help of some embezzled mother flame, of course. Now, this might not seem like big news for a lot of people, because that's what we've been speculating ever since it happened, but it's always good to have these things confirmed, because you never know. The world government could have had its own project going on under Saint Saturn to build a fourth ancient weapon, or I guess it would be called a modern weapon. But this means that for the first time in all of the One Piece, all three ancient weapons are accounted for. And we, the good people, currently stand at a 2-to-1 advantage. We have Pluton on Wano, and we have Poseidon on Fishman Island and in Shirahoshi. So what we have is land and sea versus sky. And during the section, we also have a sneaky little cameo from one Sir Crocodile listening into the message. And I really like what Oda did here, which was showing as many characters as he could who have had a major arc involving an ancient weapon, which was of course Crocodile's whole reason for plunging Alabasta into civil war. We also saw Shirahoshi for obvious reasons, as well as Momonosuke and Kinemon trying and failing to keep Pluton a secret from everyone around them. To be honest though, that one probably doesn't matter as much because our sneaky Swamp Nakama is on the verge of delivering these secrets to Blackbeard, so soon most people are gonna know. And I fear for the future of Wano, mostly because 3 is an odd number, and I don't think we are going to go into this final war equipped with 2 out of 3 ancient weapons. It just seems like overkill. The world government have one, I guess Luffy can have one, and I think it's highly likely that Blackbeard will also have one, just to make things extra chaotic and ever so intriguing. And I think the Pluton is a good candidate for him. Of all of the ancient weapons, the one I cannot see being used against us is Poseidon. I mean, yeah, Blackbeard could capture Shirahoshi and he could make her cry, but that's probably not going to end up well for him. She'll just summon the Sea Kings and they will destroy him. Pluton, on the other hand, is a battleship, which are traditionally much harder to make cry. In fact, in One Piece, the standard is ships making us cry. Rest in peace, Going Merry. But also, it's much easier to aim at stuff. Going back to Shirahoshi briefly, something I'm also fascinated by is that it's becoming clear that Imu is using the power of the sea to drown the world. However, in doing so, he's actively reducing the power of Uranus and Pluton, whilst amplifying the powers of Poseidon that he does not possess. And really, if the whole world is an ocean, which ancient weapon do you want most? Probably the water one that lets you control the big fish. Furthermore, something I like about this section is Vegapunk taking responsibility for what happened to Leloucia, as well as what may be about to happen to other parts of the world. All this time, he did have his eyes set on a free energy utopia. He never wanted to hurt anyone with his inventions, but he did, and that's, well, I was about to say that's something he's going to have to live with, but that's not true. I like that he doesn't dismiss it though. He easily could have boiled this down to a purely scientific argument about progress and the risks associated with it, but instead he showed empathy and humanity. And it continues to make me wonder if Vegapunk is a modern representation of the ancient kingdom. People who did strive for this ultimate utopia, but within the ancient kingdom, there was a traitor. Someone who stole some of their fuel as well as a whole ass ancient weapon, and then, oh no, a war. It's even taking me back to Frankie's flashback, where Spandam used the Battle Frankies to frame them, because I'm imagining a similar situation with Imu. One where, say, he gets access to Uranus, then uses it on like a ton of countries, but blames the ancient kingdom. No, that's their technology. They did that, not me. Imu. And that's how he was able to form the 20 Kingdom Alliance. Because from their perspective, the ancient kingdom was evil, and then they were lost. Now, for anyone who's been watching this channel for any amount of time, you should be familiar with our next cameo man. It is Vice Admiral Kommel. He's one of my favorite tertiary characters, whose whole arc revolves around finding a way to have a good coffee to drink during his morning meetings. And in this chapter, he actually has his signature cup of coffee with him. And Kommel is probably taking the news of Leloucia's destruction quite hard. because that's where the milk for his coffee comes from. And that milk, it is key to the perfect morning coffee. It was specifically made by Moda and her cows, mostly by the cows. So Kommel's life is now in shambles. And in all seriousness, I could see that being a reason for him to join the rebel side of the Marines. I know it sounds stupid, but the idea that the world government can so easily erase an island that his favorite milk was produced on is reason enough for minor characters to rethink their lives in one piece. And right after Kommel, we catch up with the Prudence Kingdom featuring King Elisabello, who I would personally describe as a bit of a mini ancient weapon because he has the yet to be explained King Punch power. And I think he's a pretty easy ally in the upcoming war. He's good friends with King Rico of Dressrosa, and he just generally seems like one of those kings that you would actually want. One who does the best he can for his people, and one who will stand up to tyranny even if it comes from the world government, which he is part of. Heading back to Egghead Island, we have a chat between Stussy and Edison, which continues to be a fascinating conversation, because during the last chapter we saw Stussy having something of a crisis of meaning. She found herself very much lacking purpose after Stella's death and the betrayal of her cool secret agent friends. But it must be incredibly difficult to find that sense of individuality as a clone, which is why I love that Edison is the one who's giving her that. Because Edison is also effectively a clone, at least mentally partially. So I imagine that Edison does at least partially understand where she's coming from. And what we have here is some very deep clone chat, where Edison does the typical "I'm about to sacrifice myself" thing of telling Stussy, you must survive. And very few people have ever survived themselves after telling someone to survive like that. But I do think we might have a decent ending incoming for CP0, because Stussy is about to free Kaku because he's her friend. And it seems like it's pretty much up to them to decide the fate of the Seraphim. Will they end up under world government control, or will the Cypherpol agents abscond with them? Because I don't know if I can see the former captured Cypherpol agents rejoining the world government, not after the kindness that they were shown by the Straw Hats, and not after the not kindness that they've been shown by Saint Shepherd Jupiter, who is seen trying to eat all of them in this chapter. You see, that's a problem, because unlike Luffy, they don't have the toon powers to survive being swallowed by a giant beast. So if they do survive, and I think there's a very real chance they may not, but if they do, I don't think they're going to be too keen to show up to work on Monday morning. Meanwhile, Stussy definitely can't rejoin the world government because of the betrayal, and Rob Lucci and Kaku are probably seriously rethinking their lives at this point. The only issue with the Seraphim is that their command priority is still set to York's orders, I believe, and no Vegapunk can override them. So the only possible way to give them a new command would be from the 5 Elder Stars or from York, unless there's another secret protocol like there was with Bonnie and the Pacifista. Meanwhile, the location of the transmission has finally been discovered, and I'm proud to say that we called it. And by we, I mean you. I received a few comments correctly speculating that the transponder snail was within the Iron Giant, which made far too much sense. As when we went back on it, the very first time we met Stella was him phasing out of the Iron Giant, meaning that he was likely planting a certain something inside of it, which is the best case scenario for us, because now each of the elders have to stop what they're doing and focus fire down that Iron Giant. So that gives us the opportunity to escape, as well as for the Iron Giant to do one last thing to help Joy Boy bring about the dawn of the world. I think it was always going to end in some form of this, because if the Iron Giant survives, that's a problem because we get spoilers. As a being that lived during the Void Century, well, he could just say all of the things that happened, unless it powered down, I guess. But that's probably not going to happen in a nice way, because the elders now need to dissect him for snails. But then, and very rudely I might say, Vegapunk decides to publicly call out the former Pirate King and his crew as people who knew everything, even more than him, and decided to do nothing about it. At which point we see what might be my favorite cameo of this batch of chapters, which is a drunk Silvers Rayleigh assuming what is probably the exact same position he was in on the day that Roger was executed. This is Rayleigh's big news position. If he sees something that's about to go down that's going to change the world, then he goes and he sits in his special chair, and then spends the rest of the night laughing, crying, and drinking himself unconscious. And that last panel of Rayleigh smiling on the bar is amazing, because he knows the truth. He's thinking about it, and just like that day on Laugh Tale, he's laughing. Not only that, but he's even chastising Vegapunk for ruining the joke for everyone else. From Rayleigh's perspective, Vegapunk is about to give away the punchline before we finish the setup. You know that wonderful joke that involves the world being artificially flooded and the threat of it happening again to completely wipe out humanity? That classic joke. Look, I personally have not been to Laugh Tale, so I'm clearly missing the joke here, as is the rest of the world. But I can't help but feel comforted by this, just slightly, which I think is very much what we need right now. These last few chapters, and in fact this whole arc, has been an onslaught of mind-blowingly unpleasant information about the past, the present, and the future circumstances of this world. This is definitely a time to be worried because it is going to get a hell of a lot worse before it gets better. I mean, just think about this. Whatever this Great War is, it hasn't even begun yet. So things are gonna get real bad. But here, Silver's Rayleigh is embodying the idea of Joy Boy. The fact that amongst everything, all of this horrible stuff that's going on, we have this tiny ray of hope, pun unfortunately intended, from a drunk old man whose actions are assuring us that everything is going to be okay, and that eventually, once the punchline does drop, we're all going to be laughing alongside of him. And really, who are we to refuse that ray of hope? And more importantly, who are you to refuse subscribing to this channel for consistent injections of One Piece culture administered directly into your YouTube feeds?